Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Coming of Age, which is episode 18 of season 1 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the first season episode, Coming of Age. So Coming of Age is the episode where Wesley goes to a Starbase to do a test to get into Starfleet Academy. He competes with 3 other potential candidates, but only one of them will get to go to the Academy, in which they overgo some hijinks and whatnot. And of course, Wesley doesn't get in because he still needs to stay on the show. Meanwhile, a really rigid, antagonistic Starfleet officer, Commander Remick, comes on board the Enterprise and tries to dig up dirt on Picard and rubs everyone the wrong way and gets in everyone's nerves. And then it's revealed that he was just doing this to check and make sure nothing was wrong with Picard, and at the end says he admires him and would love to serve on the Enterprise. And then the Admiral who sent him, Admiral Quincy, offers Picard a job at Starfleet Academy as the head of Starfleet Academy, saying that there's something up with Starfleet and he wants his friends closer, but Picard declines the offer, which of course he does because he needs to stay on the show as well. So, alright, so this is an episode I've heard unusually a lot of people praise. I've watched several reviews where they were saying, oh, this is one of the better episodes of season 1. I believe I may have even heard someone say this was the best episode of season 1. And I find this odd because I remember when my sister covered all of season 1 of Next Generation, she was just, I think she was, going episode by episode. When she got to this episode, she was just like, sucked, and skipped it, and it really had bad things to say about it. And I'm more in line with her thinking on this episode. I didn't like it. Any sort of Wesley-centric episode, I'm not a huge fan of. Now, to my knowledge, this is the first, if I remember correctly, this is the first clear A-plot, B-plot episode of Next Generation, which they'll do a lot more in later seasons, and then Voyager will do it to death. DS9 will, do A-plot, B-plot, C-plot, D-plot. But this is the most clear, split in half, 2 different stories. I suppose you could call the Wesley thing the A-plot. I guess we do spend more time on that, and that is where the title of this episode comes from. What is really interesting to me, even though I don't really care for this episode, I do note that the season gets a little bit better from this episode onward. And that's something I've been saying a while, that the second half of season 1 is definitely better than the first half. And the interesting thing about that is I just read that officially, because I thought Maurice Hurley was the showrunner for the entirety of season 1, and Roddenberry was just the executive producer overseeing producing it. But apparently Roddenberry himself was the official showrunner for season 1 of TNG up until this episode. This is the first episode where Maurice Hurley does take over as the official showrunner, and he will be the showrunner from the rest of season 1 and into the entirety of season 2. Now, I have my issues with Maurice Hurley, and I do think the show got incredibly better once they kicked him out. Once he wasn't involved. But it's interesting to note that the second half of the season, which I had pointed out was better, it had better episodes like Symbiosis and Arsenal Freedom and Conspiracy, Neutral Zone, all those I find a bit more interesting than the schlock we got in the first half. And the interesting thing about that is that's when Maurice Hurley takes over. And that Roddenberry was overseeing the show when it was not so good in its first half, and I don't think that's a coincidence. But anywho, that's not to say I really care for this episode, but I do see that it is a bit less cheesy, just a little bit, mind you, than the previous part of season 1. So, where to begin? Let me begin with the Wesley storyline. So, this whole thing about him competing with 3 other candidates for Starfleet Academy, and they go through these crazy tests and they're psyching each other out. I don't know if that seems like a really good way to, find candidates for Starfleet Academy. And plus, it doesn't seem very Roddenberry-like, because Roddenberry would say some shit. He would talk about the Roddenberry box that he put in the first couple seasons of Enterprise, particularly season 1 and 2. It was still there in season 3. Season 4 is when he started leaving the show, and then sadly passed away during the making of season 5. So the Roddenberry box was mainly a thing in the first couple seasons, but Roddenberry box is basically saying, there's no conflict in the 21st century. He would even say some bullshit like when A Measure of a Man was going to be written, he rejected that script, and apparently it never would have gotten made. But he went on vacation, because the reason why he didn't want it made, because there's no lawyers in the 24th century. There's no grieving in the 24th century. Like in the episode The Bonding, where Ronald D. Moore wanted to write a story about a young boy who's grieving about the loss of his mother, and he says there's no grieving in the 21st century. So it's this Roddenberry box, which I agree is bullshit, and it does stifle good storytelling, which relies on conflict. And I guess he was on vacation when they made this episode, because this is when Maurice Hurley took over, so I guess that's how they got away with it, because the way they select Starfleet Academy candidates seems very outside of the Roddenberry box, seems very counter to it, where here there's like tons of people who want to get in, but only a very select few elites get in. That seems kind of biased. What about the common man? What about the common person who dreams of exploring the stars, and maybe they have a disability, maybe they can't do well on these tests, but they want to be in Starfleet, they want to be a part of the action, but no, fuck them. They can't even get to the academy because this thing is so elite. It is so elite. That seems very un-Roddenberry box. just saying, and so much so where I kind of raise an eyebrow about this. Like, plus, because I think the idea of tests, taking these tests and getting a score on it, is very sort of un-24th century-ish, un-utopia vision-ish. Really, you gotta take these tests and have people judge you and sit there and watch you. I don't know, it seems very outside of the box, the Roddenberry box, to me. But anyway, other than that, like, it's annoying. I don't like Wesley Crusher, and I don't like Wesley episodes in this one, and they bring up this friend that he had, which we'd never heard of or seen of before, and somehow we're supposed to care about when he steals the shuttle. It's just to give the Enterprise something to do, blah blah blah. And then he meets other people. That girl I thought was very interesting, the way it kind of felt like she was flirting with him a bit, but she was like very competitive, and she's like, it's a good thing you're cute or you'd be very annoying. The thing is, most people don't find Wesley cute, they just find him very annoying. But anyway, and that was I kind of liked her. I kind of wish they did more with her, but she's kind of precursor to like Robin Leffler, which, as I mentioned when I reviewed the game, was the only good thing about that episode. It is, but they didn't really do enough with her there. They had a Vulcan just for having a Vulcan, and didn't really do anything. It was mainly focused on Mordok, who was like, I don't know, He's fine. It's our first look at Benzites, which, okay, interesting, the breathing apparatus and whatnot. But I didn't really find that the friendship between him and Wesley all that interesting, if I'm being honest. And I didn't really find this to be a good character story for us. I suppose that's why some people like this episode. They think it was, this is such a good character story for us. I don't think so. I think it's annoying and I don't like it. And, alright, here's let me get to my main gripe with this storyline. The psych tests. So they're talking about doing... Alright, I have so many issues with this psych test. Worf is... I did kind of like the scene where Worf was tutoring Wesley and saying his negative experience with the psych test. That was about testing how he doesn't have... He finds it hard to put his life in the hands of others, which is something a Starfleet officer has to do on a daily basis, which was interesting. It was an interesting early look into Worf's character. I like that scene. But the whole idea, the whole execution, particularly of the psych test, seems kind of bullshit to me, or kind of, TV-ish, trope-ish, because... So they put Wesley in this little room, and they say, your psych test is about to begin. So he's sitting there waiting, and then he hears this loud noise crashing, goes outside, and there's no one's around in the corridors, and he has to go into this other room, and there's a huge accident, 2 people are about to die. Shouldn't he realize that this is part of his psych test? Because they just put him in this room and said, literally said your psych test will begin shortly. And when all this bullshit happens, he should be like, oh, well, this is all bullshit. This is all staged. But, of course, obviously, he doesn't think that. He's like, oh, my God, there's a crash in the thing, and we're all going to die. And that, the dude, Admiral, whoever, comes out and says, no, it's okay. It's just part of your psych test. And I'm kind of thinking, shouldn't he have figured this out, especially being the boy fucking genius that he's supposed to be? Can't even figure out that this is staged and part of the... they literally put him in the room and said, your psych test will begin shortly. And then this bullshit happens. Obviously, it's part of the psych test. So that's problem number 1 I have with it. Problem number 2, which I think is actually the bigger issue I have with the psych test, is, isn't this fucking dangerous? I mean, and how are they going to fake, having all that, steam coming out? How do they react, actually make that seem real? Is it actual, steam or whatever? Is the thing an actual danger, or are they just faking it? If they're faking it, how do they do it so convincingly? Doesn't it take so much time to do it? And more than that, could it be dangerous to put someone in the situation where they're just, play acting, but they think it's real? Couldn't they do something unpredictable that could put someone's life in actual danger? This seems reckless to me. It's like people who play a prank on other people and they think it's going to be fun, but then they don't predict how the other person will react, and they end up doing something unpredictable that ends up killing or hurting someone. It seems like these Starfleet, commanders or cadet or admirals, whoever they are running this place, are pretty careless and reckless and dangerous and could really hurt someone. It just seems like a bad idea. Why would you do this in the first place? And I just can't get over that. It's just the whole concept of it was dumb. And of course Wesley loses because he needs to stay in the show, and Murdoch gets in, but he does get in only because Wesley helped him. See, even though Wesley doesn't get into Starfleet Academy, the show has to tell you how fucking awesome he is and how he's perfect and he can't get anything wrong. And the only reason that guy got in instead of him is because Wesley's awesome. Such a fucking Mary Sue. I'm sick of it. Sick of it, and I don't like it. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about that storyline. So then we get over to the other storyline with Remick coming aboard and being an asshole. And it's just so fake. I just don't really buy some of the bullshit he says when he gets up into people's face about Picard. It seems very extremely obvious that he's being antagonistic for the sake of being antagonistic, and some of his arguments are so weak sauce and so dumb, and he's like butting heads with the crew, and when that like little, the teenager steals the shuttle and almost kills himself, he gets in the way. He's like, Picard, you gotta stop this right now. And he's being a dick, and then at the end he's like, oh, I actually really like you guys so much, I want to be part of the crew. And that's just so tropey. It's obviously trying to see he was actually just putting on an act. He was actually a good guy the whole time. Bullshit. That is just so frustrating to me. And I just, God, it's so sloppy story writing. It's just so cliches, so cheesy 80s syndication feel to it. It's just, I just hated this whole thing. Hated it. So, Admiral Guy Quincy offers Picard a position at Starfleet Academy. Picard, of course, turns it down because he needs to stay in the show. This is a long tradition of characters turning down promotions in Next Gen so they can stay and be a main cast on the show. Mainly it's Riker who does it 3 more times after this, but Picard did it first. But anyway, so this is a precursor to the episode Conspiracy, because when Quincy mentions, oh, there's something going on in Starfleet, it's foreshadowing what happens in Quincy, in which Quincy and Remick both make a return in that episode, so it's kind of setting up for this episode. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I really get the impression that they didn't know exactly what they were going to do with Conspiracy when they made this episode. They were just hinting at something just for the plot, for him to want Picard close or whatever. And even when Picard turned it down, it's like, oh, I'm sure it's probably nothing. And the next time, of course, we see him, he's being controlled by a bluegill alien in the back of his skull and trying to, drop kick Riker. Yeah, so I don't think they had Conspiracy in mind when they made this episode. I think they were maybe thinking maybe they would follow up on it, and then later someone came up with the idea. Of course, I don't know this for a fact, but that's just the inkling I get. I don't get that they actually knew what was going on. So, excuse me. So overall, I did think it was totally pointless and dumb. So now let me thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. Of course, very much appreciated. It helps the channel thrive, helps the channel to continue, and yeah, I just really appreciate that. So we have Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Matty Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Michelosio, Nomad Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal Howells. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So now I got a few patron comments on this particular episode to read. First comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, this is the episode that introduces Starfleet Academy or Starfleet training tests. Of course, they always have twists, and for some odd reason, word doesn't spread about these misleading created catastrophes. I guess the unnamed Indian ensign and the short with Pike could have been excused, as I guess it was Una who first came up with these tests. But you figure that Wesley would have done his homework and knew 100 years later of these tests. Almost makes me wonder in Picard Season 3, when those cadets were killed in the terrorist action, whether they wondered if this was a simulation and not a real tragedy, and that's why so many died, not leaving right away, staying cool, saying, oh yeah, it's only a test, LOL. otherwise, mostly a forgettable episode, more interesting in introducing characters and the possible situation covered later in Conspiracy. Needless to say, our Wesley Sue could not even get into Academy at first try. Who would have thought? 4 hardly coming of age epiphanies out of 10. So... So yeah, they're reckless. Just making the same point I am. I totally agree. They're reckless for running these tests that try to fool people. That's one point I didn't think of, is that they could have caused people to, when there's a real life situation, to be like, yeah, it's just another test, and they die. It's so reckless. But also, Wesley Sue not getting in the Academy on the first try, but of course the person who did get in only got in because of Wesley, because he's so awesome and he's saves the universe. Anyway, next comment is from Greg Marley. The Wesley storyline here was kind of cliche, but par for the course for the first season. But other story of the Admiral with his fears of a conspiracy taking over Starfleet was generally creepy. It always seems strange to me that this story was separated by a full 6 episodes from its natural partner episode, Conspiracy. Why? It's easy for us now to go back and look at the timeline and pick and choose the episodes we want to watch, but how many people at the time would have clearly remembered this episode 6 weeks later when Conspiracy aired? This one should have preceded Conspiracy by 1 or 2 episodes at the most. But I did like how during the shuttlecraft emergency, Picard finally told Remick to get out of my face or I'll have you removed, when he kept popping up to make these threats. And I liked Picard's line to Remick that the only thing I'm guilty of is letting this charade go as long as it has. But then when Remick made his report, he showed that he understood the sense of family between the bridge crew and wasn't actually that bad, just very zealous in his duty to investigate. Still a missed opportunity to link it to the better Conspiracy. Yeah, I don't know. I think the reason why it didn't come out right before Conspiracy is probably because they hadn't thought of Conspiracy yet. That's just my wild guess. I don't know. I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I think. And again, like I said, the whole Remick thing I think was fake. I just don't buy this storytelling. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neil Howells. It says, coming of age. I think this episode has too many plot threads in it. If I had a hairstyle like Jake's, I'd steal a shuttlecraft and run away too. Wesley goes to Starfleet Academy to take the entrance exam. It would have been nice if the Vulcan woman got some more lines or character development. The Earth Girl seems to exist solely to tell Wesley that he's cute. Yucko. I'm surprised that all the candidates are allowed to study in the same room. What is to stop them from cheating? Is the psych test legal or ethical? It worries me deeply. Of course, the Murdoch deserves to win, and even the Federation plays politics. The investigation by Quinn and Remick taking place on the Enterprise is a much darker affair, but I don't think the story is resolved satisfactorily. I want to like this episode more, but it feels like 2 unfinished episodes cobbled together. And hasn't Wesley got anything better to wear for his exams than that silly looking rainbow sweater? Coming of Age features the first appearance of a Vulcan in TNG and the first appearance of a shuttlecraft. 4 benzites out of 10. That's first shuttlecraft in TNG. I did not realize that. Anyway, my rating for Coming of Age out of 10, I'm going to give this episode a 3. Very poor. I almost gave it a 4, to be fair to it, because there was some things I thought somewhat interesting, like the the friendships that Wesley was making. I guess, I mean, with that girl who's kind of being very competitive but kind of flirting with them, I thought was cool, but they didn't do enough with it. And as I said, I like the scene with like Worf, like explaining his backstory, and they get a bit into the psychology of Wesley. But I'm sorry, but it just did such a bad job. Like the whole psych test is just, I don't buy it. It's just very reckless and cheesy and dangerous, and they're gonna kill a lot of cadets by doing it. And just how careless they are with the cadets' lives. And yeah, I'm gonna go the Roddenberry route. I don't think this is a very good way to how they're so super selective and who gets to go to Starfleet. Like there's tons of ships, and these ships has like hundreds of people on it, sometimes 1,000 people on it, so there should be plenty of room for Starfleet. Stop being so, and there's just star bases and outposts on planets and everything, so why are they so fucking picky? What about the boy who really wants to go to Starfleet, and they're like, fuck you, we're gonna make you take all these billion tests and traumatize you with this bullshit that could get you killed. Oh god, sorry, I can't get over that. And the B plot with Remick is just so, it's contrived, it's choreographed, it's ridiculous. I don't buy it in any sense of the word, with Remick going over the top, oh, I'm gonna get you, blah, blah, and at the end saying, oh, I actually want to serve on this ship. The fuck you do. This is just and as I said, I don't think it feeds into conspiracy that well, if I'm being honest. It's kind of, as I said, I get the impression they didn't know exactly what they were going to do with conspiracy. But anyway, I mean, I think conspiracy is a much better follow-up than this episode deserved. So that's it. I'm going to give it a 3. I can't, not giving it a 4 because it's just, too many things wrong with it. So that's it for my review of Coming of Age. So coming up next on my channel, next Monday will be another TNG review, this time for the episode Heart of Glory. Wednesday we'll be back for another episode of Ahsoka review, and then Thursday another review of Star Trek Lower Decks, new episode, and then Saturday shall return for another TNG review for the Arsenal of Freedom. So be sure to check out my channel for all of that and many more videos and many more shows and many more Star Trek videos as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.